This is the sixth virtual meeting that we at the Regional Department for Asia and the Pacific are organizing for our distinguished member state in this region since the outbreak of the pandemic. As many of you may recall and also participated, we have organized webinar on the healing solution for tourism challenge, communication strategies, the impact of COVID-19 on tourism, and technical assistance package for tourism recovery. Now we are having summer holiday season and many destinations around the world, in particular here in Europe, are welcoming tourists back, and their safety matters will be of paramount importance. And the issues on consumers' protection and gaining consumers' confidence are critically important for every single destination. In light of this background, and today's webinar, in close collaboration with my colleague Alicia Gomez, who is a legal counsel at the UNWTO, we are designing this webinar to help the Asia Pacific members understand better the situation of international tourists during the COVID-19 crisis and rebuild the consumers' confidence and trust the way forward. So with this objective in mind, I'm very pleased to inform you that we have three prominent speakers representing different tourism sector in Asia. And the first, Dr. Yan Man Lo, the assistant professor at the Macau Institute for Tourism Studies, will share us with her insight on consumers' protection and confidence by highlighting the case of Macau. And RDAP is very proud of its partnership with IFT Macau that we offered the tailor-made, all-sponsored training program to over 150 senior tourism officials for the UNWTO member state. And thank you, Dr. Yan Manlo, for joining us today. And second, Mr. Junichi Kumada, who is the Executive Director at the JTB Tourism Research and Consulting Corporation, will deliver on the subject in the relationship between travel agencies and consumer directory and some of the government policies in Japan, as well as the relevant issues on tourism gains. I'm sure many of you remember that Mr. Kumada used to work with us at the UNWTO for over 3 years. So we are very pleased for having him for this webinar. And lastly, we are extremely pleased to offer a platform for another intervention by Mr. Upali Latnayake, the former Director General of the International Cooperation at the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority. And Mr. Upali will share us with the government policy to support the tourist right protection in Sri Lanka. And thank you so much for sharing your precious time with us today. And we believe there are valuable experience and insight representing the government and private sector and institution will greatly enrich the discussion and contribute in addressing the very important issue of building the consumer's confidence. And without further ado, let's get started by inviting Alicia Gomez and the legal counsel at the World Tourism Organization. And for your information, Alicia Gomez has more than 15 years of professional work at the United Nations, including 10 years at the UNWTO, in which she is currently engaging the very important process of the development and adoption of UNWTO's Framework Convention on Tourism Ethics. And of course, Alicia will deliver the first presentation on the international protection of tourists, revealing the consumer's confidence, and invite each speaker for the presentation before moderating panel discussion and Q&A session. And before I invite immediately Alicia, I just have an announcement to the participant that during our session that we will make a questionnaire, 4 questions to the UNWTO members who participate in this webinar. And then during our discussion and before conclude the webinar, we will share the outcome of the survey that we conducted. And now let us welcome Alicia for the presentation and moderation of today's webinar. Alicia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Harry. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to all of you who are viewing this webinar, and also a very warm welcome to all our panelists. As my dear colleague Harry, who's hosting us today in this webinar, and I want to thank him and his team for the excellent organization. We have a very good panel today composed of private and public stakeholders. And this is a matter that affects us all. So I think this will give us good views and good ideas and a very, very fruitful debate. Now, I would like to start by giving you a very short introduction of the context of sorry, 1 second, because I think that my presentation now, it's worked every time, the share screen, but now it's not working. So I'm just going to ask my colleagues in the UNWTO Academy if they can upload it in the screen. So I would like to, with this presentation, to let you know a little bit the context of this webinar today. And what are we doing at UNWTO on this specific topic, which of course we will be informing you in due time, also through the governing bodies. Just waiting for my colleagues if they can put the presentation.
Just 1 minute, Alicia, if you would
yes,
give us
thank
just
you.
I'm
of
sorry,
course.
technical glitch in the background.
Thank you. So let me just start by saying that as part of the efforts that UNWTO is doing to support our member states to recover from the crisis, we do not want to forget the perspective of the tourists and how they've lived the crisis and how the crisis has had an impact on them. In fact, we know that once international tourism resumes, and as Harry said, this is already happening in Europe, we are going to be talking about traveling with the virus, with all the risk factors that these entails for tourists in the event of a second wave or of new outbreaks. And until we have an effective treatment or a vaccine, we believe that tourists might be affected by the situations that they lived during the COVID-19 crisis. So I'm not sure if the presentation is there. I will give it another try.
Yes, please, Alicia, can you give it another try, because I didn't see your PPTs.
Now it's there. Now it's there, right?
Thank you, Alicia. We can see it. Thank you.
You can see it? Okay, so perfect. Okay, so sorry for that. That's so much for technology. So I don't think I can move it. I can move the slide.
We unfortunately can't move it for you from here. Mr. Li Yang is sharing his screen, so he is the one who
Okay,
needs to
perfect.
for you.
Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, perfect. So now, there we go. So during the COVID-19 crisis, we've all seen how tourists have suffered the following situations. The closure of borders with little or no notice, leaving them very, very little time to react. Millions of tourists were stranded during the crisis, and they suffered different luck and treatment depending on their nationality, but also on the destination in which they were stranded. We've seen outbreaks in cruises, in resorts, in hotels, leading sometimes to dramatic situations. We've also seen how there was a big confusion and lack of clarity as to who is responsible for what. We've seen tourists having limited access to accommodation and public health in the destinations in which they were stranded. We've seen also millions of flights being canceled. And here we've seen very different measures being taken from an airline to another, from a company to another, but also from a country to another. Even here in Europe, we've seen how European countries have taken different approaches, despite the fact that there are EU directives that should apply. And finally, when tourists try to resort to their travel insurances, they discovered that these do not cover acts of God, force majeure situations, such as the one created by this pandemic. Next slide, please. So the crisis has revealed the absence of an international legal framework applying to the assistance to tourists in emergency situations. It has also highlighted the lack of uniformity when it comes to tourism consumer rights at the international level. And most importantly, it has also revealed to the tourist his own vulnerability, and particularly as a consumer, and how exposed he is in situations such as the one of the COVID-19. In this sense, we believe it is important that that we restore tourist confidence in all tourism stakeholders involved in an international travel. The tourist needs to be able to trust the country of the destination, and that this country will eventually assist him if there is an emergency situation. He also needs to trust his own country of residence and the cooperation between the two. Likewise, it is important that there is clarity among of the responsibilities among all tourism stakeholders that are involved in a particular travel. And also we've seen that COVID-19 has somehow changed the rules of the game. So we believe that perhaps the old rules may not be effective anymore, and that we need to find a new share of responsibilities that is more balanced and more fair among all tourism stakeholders. Next slide, please. So from UNWTO's perspective, we believe that we could rebuild trust in 2 steps. As a first step, we think that it is essential and it is very urgent and critical to adopt a set of minimum standards at the international level on the assistance and protection of tourism consumer rights, and on assisting them in emergency situations in order to cover for potential new outbreaks, second waves of the virus, in case international tourism has resumed and we still don't have a vaccine or an effective treatment, so that we don't see the situations that I described earlier in my presentation happening again. And as a second step, we believe that we should do some efforts to harmonize and develop international standards on tourism consumer protection that may also provide solutions in the post-COVID-19 scenario. As we know, new protocols, new measures are being taken in the field of safety and security in order to resume international travel. And these protocols impose obligations for tourists, new obligations for tourists. Now, these new obligations also need to come hand in hand with new rights that assist them. And all of these, both the protocols, the measures on safety and security, but also the tourism consumer rights, need to be as harmonized and as homogeneous at the international level as possible, so that we avoid having tourists having to study the legislation of the countries that they intend to visit, or having to hire a lawyer to advise them on any contracts for an international travel that they may be considering to conclude. Through these two steps, what we are aiming is at developing an international code on the protection of tourist rights that could provide sufficient guarantees to tourists, but also clarify the responsibilities among all tourism stakeholders at the international level. Next slide, please. So some of the minimum standards that we believe should be included in this code should establish clearly the responsibilities and obligations for providing up-to-date information to tourists during a crisis, providing basic assistance to tourists, food, shelter, communication, but also access to health facilities. What happens if there are cancellations in case of force majeure situations, and what are the rights that assist tourists in those cases? What are the responsibilities for the cooperation among states, particularly with regards to consular, visa, and repatriation facilities? Also, what happens if the service provider becomes insolvent during the trip? And finally, also establish alternative dispute resolution mechanisms at the international level, which are unexisting today, so that tourists may have their rights restored in a fast, in an efficient manner, and not through the traditional judicial way, which is not effective in this type of situation. These are, of course, only some of the minimum standards that we think should be developed, but they are probably the ones that would affect more the first step, which is the assistance to tourists in emergency situations, and therefore have more priority in the short, medium term. Next slide, please. So at UNWTO, we have been working in the development of these standards for some years. In fact, we started an important work after the crisis of the Icelandic volcano. Some of you may remember in 2010, which closed the airspace of Europe for several weeks. And this created a crisis that had some similarities with the COVID-19. Of course, the COVID-19 has exceeded all previous emergencies and crises we've seen in the tourism sector. But after this Icelandic volcano crisis, a working group was composed at UNWTO, was constituted by 36 member states, together also with international organizations, also some private sector entities, affiliate members such as IATA, for instance. And the purpose of this working group, which started its work in 2012, was to clarify the obligations of all tourism stakeholders, also to try to find a fair and balanced share of responsibilities in the case of the assistance to tourists in emergency situations, but also in consumer trying to set some minimum standards on consumer rights protection. Also, the purpose was to enforce international cooperation for the assistance and repatriation of tourists. And it also, this working group also provided some indications as to what could be the role of UNWTO to monitor and assist during emergencies. A preliminary proposal for a draft convention, for draft international convention, so a legally binding instrument, was endorsed by the 22nd session of the General Assembly in 2017 in China. And so what we're doing right now in the Secretariat is use this work, because there is an exhaustive work that had been done for more than 6 years, and use it on the one hand to issue recommendations for our member states on the assistance to tourists in emergency situations. Of course, we need to revise and adjust the work that had been done to the extraordinary circumstances caused by the COVID-19, and also at the same time use this work for the development of an international code on the protection of tourists. So we believe that the development of this code and its approval by our governing bodies its establishment would definitely contribute to the recovery efforts that all the member states are doing. And we see it as an essential pillar for the recovery. Of course, the focus now is placed on the health and the security protocols, but it is important not to forget the perspective of tourist consumer rights, and that restoring their confidence will also call for actions that go beyond the establishment of health and security protocols and involve providing them with sufficient guarantees in emergency situations, but also in the post-COVID-19 scenario. So this was just to give you an overview. Thank you very much, Li Yang, and I apologize for the inconvenience, for the technical problem. Thank you, Li Yang, for having the presentation ready. So this was just to set up a little bit the context, to explain to you what we are doing. I think also the questions in the poll will also provide us with very valuable insight on how the member states think on this particular issue. And now I would like to turn to our panelists, to the three panelists that we have today. So with the permission of the gentlemen, I will start by asking Dr. Yan Lo to do her presentation. Dr. Yan Lo has conducted extensive research on the psychology behind tourists and the behavior of tourists as consumers. So I think she's in a very good position to also give us some insight and also highlight the case of Macau, which I think has very interesting practices that we could definitely pick up and also include perhaps even when we do the development of the code. So Dr. Yan Lo, the virtual floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Alicia. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Alicia. Actually, I'm quite happy to be here and to share my views on the pandemic, and also to talk about the current practice and situation of Macau. So here I would like to share my screen first. So I guess you guys can see my slide, right? So since the time is quite limited, I have about 10 minutes, and that's why I would like to focus on the current situations of Macau. And actually the pandemic, the COVID pandemic happened in the late January this year. So when it happened to Macau, there are many countries were not yet in this travel. So just for your brief information, and Macau is a special administrative region of China with a population of 650,000. But somehow, I would like to say the situation of pandemic in Macau is quite well controlled, under control, because so far we have 46 cases. We only have 46 cases of coronavirus, and which caused 0 deaths, and also 45 of which have already recovered. So in the past 3 months, we have 0 new cases of infection. And but even so, the Macau government still highly encouraged the local residents to protect themselves by practicing some particular behavior. Like everyone, basically now in Macau, everyone is still wearing a mask whenever they go out. So in the public area, no matter indoor or outdoor, they wear a mask. And personally, I also think that wearing mask is quite important to protect everyone from the pandemic, the coronavirus. And also the body temperature measure is must basically at the entrance of some public buildings. So schools and shopping malls, and it is very, very necessary. And also the Macau residents, they need to declare about their travel history of the past 14 days. So they need to declare they haven't visited some other foreign countries in the past 14 days. And also they stay away from the crowd. And this is also what the local government encouraged them to do. And in terms of the visitors, well, basically today we have very, very few visitors come to Macau. But in January and February, when the outbreak of pandemic happened, basically many flights were not yet heavily canceled, and we only canceled the flight from Wuhan, the Hebei province of China. And so those tourists who stay in Macau will live in Macau very soon, very quickly. And but in terms of those visitors who come to Macau in the early stage of the pandemic, the Macau government, practiced a mandatory quarantine for those visitors, and also for those Macau residents who travel out abroad and coming back to Macau, they also need to quarantine themselves for 14 days right after the arrival. So at that moment, I remember a few hotels were selected and used as a designated place for quarantine. And also the Macau government subsidized and supports a lot financially those quarantines. So so now the major challenges for the tourism and hospitality industry in Macau is so far we don't have international tourists, because basically Macau is closed for international tourists. Macau, we would say, many Macau people will think that we are in the ending of the pandemic, but somehow we know that in the world, in many countries, many regions, the pandemic is still very severe. So that's why Macau is basically closed for international tourists. And also because of this reason, and the visitors have decreased by 99%. And it hurts the economy very badly, very severely. And also particularly the tourism sectors, the tourism industry, they have dropped the business by 99%. So this is a huge impact, So luckily, we didn't have many complaints or many problems regarding the cancellation, because when the cancellation happened, it happened in January and February. So at that moment, the world was still not bad as today in terms of the pandemic. So and now, particularly from this week, and Macau is finally open its border to the 9 neighbor cities of the Greater Bay Area. So why only open to the 9 neighbor cities? Because those 9 neighbor cities are basically safe from the COVID virus, and there are very few cases, basically no new case of infection in those cities. So that's why after the communication of the Macau government and the government of those neighbor cities, and we finally decide, well, we can open border, and we can welcome those tourists, and also to allow the Macau residents to travel to those neighbor cities. But even so, there are still quite many challenges, and particularly we need to adjust our tourism strategy, and we need to study the tourist needs again, because these tourists are quite different from before. They are our neighbors. They know Macau very well. Probably they are repeat tourists. So how to attract their attention, and also how to protect them from the potential risk of infection. And that is what we need to do. And at this moment, we still have the governmental committee, and actually this committee was established in the early stage of the pandemic outbreak. So this committee was established to cope with the COVID crisis. And in this committee, quite many governmental departments are involved, like the Health Service Bureau, the Tourism Office, and the Immigration Office. So this committee helped to make some policies and to practice some measures to help protect and help to keep Macau safe from the COVID-19. And also every day this committee would like to update the information and share the information with the public. So I think this is important, because we have to make those information transparent and to let everybody knows what's happening in Macau. Particularly when we try to attract tourists, we need to gain their trust. Then we need to make them believe that Macau is a safe destination, right? And Macau is free of coronavirus, so they can trust it. right? And also this committee involved in the, any arguments or problems between tourists and the tourism business sectors, particularly involve the cancellation or some complaints from tourists, or if tourists need some emergency help, and the tourism government will pass their complaints or their problems to this committee, and then the committee will respond quickly to help them to solve those problems. So this is what the Macau government is doing. So in terms of the protection for both the outbound and inbound travelers, and there are some measures are going on for them. Firstly, for Macau people, if they need to cross the border and travel or visit to other cities and countries, particularly the night labor cities, they need to do a test, a nucleic acid test, and then they need to get a certificate to prove that they are free of the coronavirus. All right, so this is very important before their departure. So the same for those tourists from the night neighbor city, if they want to come to Macau, they also need to do the test and show the certificates. Show the certificates when they cross the border. If they don't have the certificates and they cannot come into Macau, so this is the very important measure and also very important practice currently going on in Macau. So also, of course, all the tour travelers, outbound, inbound, they need to declare about their travel history in the past 14 days. And body temperature measure at the border is a must. And also they are highly encouraged. And sometimes it's like a social norm already, wearing mask in public area. I'm not sure whether it is very straight in other places, but in Macau, definitely. Everyone is wearing mask. And even though everyone knows that, well, Macau now is very safe because very few, basically no case of infection, no new case of infection, but people are still wearing masks. And so we hope all those visitors, when they come into Macau, they also wear masks, even though they have the certificates to prove that they are, you know, they are not carrying any virus, and also no one is carrying any virus in Macau. So this is an important measure. And in terms of the tourist promotion, the tourist service, since Macau has very, very few tourists, we are actually really want to see more tourists come to Macau. But somehow, because of the pandemic, so that's why we try to limit, we need to change our strategy. So what do we do? And in Macau now, we are trying to promote the domestic tourism. We try to encourage the local people to join the tour and by delivering some vouchers. So this is actually sponsored and supported by the local government. So the government, the tourism office, and the concerned departments also deliver some vouchers to those local tourists who join the tour. So this is very important. It brings some business to the private business sector, including the tourism sector, travel agencies, and even hotels. And then since the tourists from the neighbor cities are coming, and they probably are very familiar with Macau, and they probably are repeat with tourists. So they will expect something different from international tourists. So that's why travel agencies and hotel, the integrated resorts, they need to redesign their products. For example, they will try to launch some exclusive package and at a very attractive price to attract those tourists who already know something about Macau. They somehow will try to help them to explore something different that they ignored before, probably, about Macau. And also, it is a recommendation that travel agency can, launch different package tours with different themes, because according to the current situation, also according to some feedback of the local tours, that some local tourists, they will find that they are living in Macau, but somehow they haven't visited some special sites or haven't visited some tourist attractions before, because in their routine, they never think about, well, I should explore something different about Macau. So now the package tour with different themes allow those tourists to know more about Macau, that to find something that they didn't realize before. So I think this is a very effective strategy and to attract those tourists. So we hope to see those extension of such tourism strategy to the tourists from the 9 neighbor cities. And also the short tours, like half-day package tour and half-day free time for the group tourists. So all those strategies are recommended, and part of them are already practiced by the tourism sectors now. And I'd like to say now we are just waiting a chance to open the border to international tourists. So when we open the border to international tourists, I think it is quite important to promote the importance, to communicate the importance of those medical measures, particularly the test, because it's good to protect the local people and also protect the health of the tourists and make them believe that Macau is a safe destination. So we hopefully try to win their trust again and to win their confidence again by doing this. So, well, basically, this is what I can share now. And if you have any question, we can talk about that later. So shall we pass back the floor to Alicia?
Thank you very much, Dr. Yanlo. This was very interesting. And it proves, also that even countries that have not been hit very hard by the COVID-19, because as you mentioned, you've only had 46 cases, but still the consequences for you, I mean, for international tourism, have been the same as any other country that has had, much more spread of the virus. So I think this proves that all countries, regardless of their situation with the COVID-19, are suffering, the closure of the borders, the travel restrictions, the cancellations, so that this is a common issue to all. I also like to say that I think it was really interesting what you mentioned about the committee that you established on mediation, because from UNWTO, and we've also included this in the recommendations for mitigating the crisis, the COVID-19 crisis. One of the recommendations was actually to promote mediation mechanisms. And you mentioned another word that is key is information, which is also, the first consumer right, and a very important one, because even in countries where national mediation mechanisms exist, sometimes tourists do not know and they are not well informed about this mechanism, so they do not make use of it. So we've seen, as a result of the cancellations, an increase in the litigation that is, of course, not good for the industry, not good for the tourists, and that is disrupting the natural confidence relationship that should establish between both. So I think the committee that you established is definitely something that we would like to explore more from UNWTO's perspective. Very interesting to learn from that.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I think the committee is quite important, and I have to say that Macau government responded to the pandemic very quickly in the very early stage. So that's why they established the committee immediately, and to deal with the problems between the tourists or consumers and the tourism sector. I think it is really necessary to have a committee to mediate their problems.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I'll definitely be in touch with you, to ask you more information about this committee, that for sure. And I would like now to turn to Mr. Junichi Kumada, who actually, as Harry said, used to be a colleague of ours. So I'm so happy to have you here, and a good friend of UNWTO. And he will be highlighting the case of Japan. So very interesting, because of course Japan has a wide experience in facing emergency situations. So I think we can all learn from their expertise on this. But also I'm very interested and curious to know about the cancellation of the Olympic Games and how they've handled this issue. And so Mr. Junichi Kumada, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and the warm hello, actually the good evening from Tokyo. great to join the UNWTO webinar as the transferring to the JTB, which is a private entity, the leading company of the tourism sector in Japan. And I just would like to provide the some observation of the customer rights protection in tourism post-COVID. Basically, in Japan, yes. But basically, I just would like to, let me, can I see my slides clearly? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
First of all, I just would like to introduce how the Japan tourism sector faced the customer protection for many years. I divided 3 steps. Basically, the basic infrastructure, and the second one is business rule and quality, and third one is innovation and creating value. This is the 3 steps related to the customer protections in Japan. First of all, the first one is the legislations. Governments and tourism associations established the some common rules. As probably most of the country has some kind of a travel-related law, which is what we call the Travel Agency Act in Japan. Since the Japanese tourism industry is very dominant by the travel agent many years. And also the governments have the travel business registration system, and categorizing which the agent who can handle the domestic tour operations or the overseas tour operations, which need a kind of a solvency ratio is much higher for the overseas trip than the domestic travels. And also the associations create some bond and compensation system, just in case of the one of the travel agency go bankrupt, to secure the customers. So this is a basic infrastructure pillar. The second one is a business rule and quality. Normally, each travel agent and tour operators have the standards form of the travel agent contract. JATA, Japan Association of the Travel Agent, create the standard form of the travel agent contract. So normally, the most of the travel agent and the tour operator follow this form, and the create the more transparent contract rules between the travel agent and also the customers. This is one to regulate and maintain the tour conditions and the transactions conditions as well. And also the Japan Travel Agency, which is the ministry, is also promoting the service provider registration system. So this is assuring the quality for the customers as well. So this is one of the another aspects to interpret the customers' rights protection as well. The third one is a more innovative way. The private company started to create some additional value of the additional service in terms of the customers' protection, such as the cancellation fee waive programs based on their own cost, or supporting the unforeseen accident expenses, which is like a sudden surgery of my family or something like that. So in that sense, I just create some portfolio of those 4 pillars. Basically, the starting from the D to C, the legislation support the kind of infrastructures, and also each agent and the tour operators create some, register by themselves, the travel service manager, tour operator, tour guide, hotel and ryokan, which is Japanese style accommodations, to make the service more visible and more reliable to the customers. So this is the tier C. And also each tour agent, tour operators create their own contract. No, sorry, not the own. It's a basic contract, which is, as I mentioned, the standard of the form of the contract. And one of the interesting things, I'm not sure if the other country has, we have some policies to guarantee the itinerary itself or booking status itself policy. And if we just miss those kind of condition, we have to compensate up to the 50% of the tour fare as a compensation, not to make the customers satisfied. And finally, the private insurance service, which I just mentioned, the kind of innovative way, which is the change without cancellation fee, or the support expense for the unforeseen accident system, such as before 14 days plus family agenda or emergency surgery. We can, if the customer would like to book the next the itinerary for the let's say after 6 months, then we can waive all the cancellation fee. So this is one of the system we have already had. So there is not much hassle during the COVID. Of course, there is some kind of hassle with the travel advice of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But once we decided, each travel agent, tour operators can easily transfer to their customers' bookings to the other dates. So that is one. And also there are 7 days or less. We have some kind of JTB has its own systems to compensate some kind of up to the $1,000 per person compensations programs. It depends on any kind of unforeseen accident, such as influenza flu or theft or losing the pet or any kind of personal matters which the customers cannot avoid intentionally. So those kind of tiers we have to see, and this is which the Japanese industry catching up in terms of the customers' protections. And let me just talk about some about the situation of the travel advice. How do I say, infamous travel advice of the MOFA, which is we have the level 1, 2, 3, 4, but most of the country is located in at the level 3 at this moment. Avoid all travel. But some of the Asian country is just lifted to the level 2, which is allows to the which allows to the essential travels to the to that country. The thing is, the tour operator cannot operate the tour on the level 2 or above. So in that sense, we are not able to operate any kind of the tour at this moment. At least end of the August, we are not able to organize the tour operation. But let's see the situation of the September 1st for the reopening the border. I mean, to send the Japanese tourists to the other countries. The important things is the need tourism destination-based analysis is the key, which is like a Hawaii or Macau, Hong Kong, or the Guam, which is one of the territory of the big country like a US or China. But the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs tend to think that which is a whole country. So that is one of the issues to think about the kind of a trouble bubble approach. It's very hard to do that. So that is our private sector's agenda. Another thing is the travel insurance is one of the how to protect the customers and the tourists. As I just checked one of the JTB's insurance company, this is the kind of a coverage of the insurance payment. Sickness, death, and the repatriation expense is covered, but if that is covered. And also the cancellation fee. This is really critical things. Cancellation fee when traveler decide to depart from their country. Yes, but in case of the evacuation of advisory or restrictive advice of the immigration, as well as a quarantine by the government. So it's very, high barriers to use this kind of insurance to feel the travelers feel, the confidence. So that is another aspects to just raise some topics on the table. The finally, agenda ahead of us, as Alicia mentioned, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics and the Paralympics postponement. This is a very big impact in the tourism sectors. But basically, since this is a postponement to the next years, so in general, most of the booking is transferred to the next year. So in that sense, we did not charge any kind of cancellations to the customers so far, but not for next years, not again, hopefully. So basically, the full refund policy has been implemented for the those kind of cancellation in the mega events. But we have to see about the impact of the mega events in the tourism sector for the future. This is a little bit risky, and also the under the new normal, probably the profits and also the revenue of the total of the mega events may not be, much as that in the tourism sector. So that is a kind of a hunch and a clue we have to discuss for the further. And second one, the travel advice can be developed based on the public-private partnerships basis, especially the not for the whole nationwide basis, destination based on the pinpoints travel alerts, maybe the more, accelerate the way to solve the this kind of fixed situation, and how private sector can join to consult the travel advice is one of the questions. And another thing, as Dr. Young Lo also mentioned, that 14 days quarantine is mandatory. So since I'm very happy to visit the Macau, since there was no, infected cases for 100 days. Unfortunately, Japan is slightly, increasing though, but the, all those kind of Macau or the Hawaii, Guam, those kind of a destination-based approach will be really, we'd like to, discuss further. But in case of the quarantine basis, 14 days in Japan, 14 days in Macau, and then 40 days back to Tokyo, and then we lose the 1 month. So then how could be the vacations? It's not the real vacations, how we can just minimize those quarantine period. Maybe this kind of a case can be just learned from the UK system, which they just reduce some kind of a number of the days of the the quarantine if the person who stayed in the safe country or some the low level risk country. Finally, redesign the rule. I just would like to propose a redesign the rule and system for the tourism consumer in this stage, since the good timing to redesign the registration system for customers and protection in the tourism sector for the innovative way. So we are very happy to provide any material, any kind of a draft of the contract, anything which the Japan has and the JTB has. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. This was very comprehensive, and I think we saw very well the distribution of the responsibilities between the public and the private sector in Japan, and so also how this cooperation is very important in the field of consumer rights protection. And also you said that this is a timely and relevant issue, and that we should look again at the legislation, at the rules, and from an innovative perspective, because the COVID-19 situation is an unprecedented emergency situation. It's going to change the way in which we travel. It's going to change the way in which tourists decide to travel. And this, requires that we also think about establishing new rules and in an innovative way, so that we think a little bit outside of the box when we do this. So thank you very much for this this excellent presentation. And I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Upali from Sri Lanka, who will be explaining how they've dealt with the situation in Sri Lanka, particularly taking very, very good care of the tourists that were stranded in the country, and also giving us many of the good practices that they have adopted during the COVID-19 crisis. So Mr. Upali, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon. And to some of my colleagues, it's good evening. Let me start thanking all the hard work done by the UNWTO in organizing a timely seminar, which is a great opportunity to the member countries as well as share different country experiences. And in our point of view, actually, let me share my presentation. Share the screen. Hope you can see. Can see the screen?
Yes, we can see it perfectly. Thank you, Mr. Upali.
Thank you. And COVID-19 we see as a big challenge to tourism, as well as from Sri Lankan point of view, it has given some opportunities as well. And for example, like tourism being the third largest foreign exchange earner to the country, and when the tourism stops and it realizes how the connected other sectors affected in the country, including the employment and also the various supply chain support to the economy. And also on the other side, the value of domestic tourism and also the value of tourism to the other sectors of the economy or other industries connected, and also the value of niche market, and also especially like environment friendly product, and also like the facilities used by smaller group of tourists. And with that, what we see is the previous year, or 2019, we had to face the Easter Sunday, which all the world knows, those who are in tourism. And it gave a very good kind of experience for us at a time of a difficulty, how we need to assist the tourists. So that experience also was quite useful to face the current COVID-19 pandemic situation in Sri Lanka. In my presentation, I will focus on three steps. Now, first, I will touch on to the how the COVID-19 incident happened, and also how we enter to the kind of a core aspect of this situation, just to get a understanding about the step-by-step the actions taken by the government to protect the country people as well as our valued tourists. And then I will touch on while during the lockdown, how especially the government policy as well as various initiatives help us to assist our valued guests, as well as how we have been moving till today. And the third one, and the most importantly, the future, when the new tourist comes, or when the country is open, when the world is sending the guests to our country, how we are ready to welcome the guests as well as to take care of the guests, and also the look after our own employees in tourism as well as the public in the country. Let me start with the first step, which you can see on the screen. The first case reported in the country by a tourist in Sri Lanka, February. And very importantly, the treatment for the COVID-19 in Sri Lanka for any citizens is free of charge. And same way, so we have offered the service to the tourism both the test, the COVID test as well as treatment for free of charge, and which gave us actually a very good the reaction from the world. And also, like, I mean, it developed a confidence on how Sri Lankans take care when a guest is in the country. And the second reported a tourist guide affected, with which government reacted very quickly and start like searching all the background as well as close down the schools. And then the next level, so we have asked the people to start working from home. And then the next stage, curfew was enforced in the areas where it was reported. And also the when there are many persons and also the number increases, government has appointed a task force to combat the COVID-19 effect in the country, and which included the government officials and also like the organization heads, as well as the heads of forces, and also the task force chaired by the army commander. Sometimes someone can ask why the army commander. Actually, the security forces plays a very big role beyond the security situation, taking care of the security situation, but humanitarian assistance and also the traveling at any time, and also the without taking leave. I mean, they were really a rescue team and also the assisting team to the public as well as wherever the cases reported. And also the very importantly in Sri Lanka, the corona combating law was passed immediately after the task force appointed. Wherever when there is a kind of a violation or maybe a difficulty to face, a legal framework was formed. And also the in 20th of March, the island-wide curfew or the close down took place in the country. So with which all these difficulties to the visitor has started, where the tourism came into the picture in facing the difficult situation. Of course, consumer right also how we looked at and also how we taken care. Let me take it up with this slide. In the first week of the incident, we have opened a hotline, which is a toll-free line, as you see the number 1912. An assistance given as per the request by any visitor from any point in the country. And the second week, we have started a special information assistance center, which run for 24/7, 24 hours, all 7 days in the week, and also which included which included like the assisting the estimated number of 12,000, 13,000 visitors in the country. And we got a lot of calls and also a lot of assistance, and where all the industry stakeholders such as the Hoteliers Association, to Operators Association, to a Guide Association, Driver Association gave us a very good support on a shift basis. They were working, though the curfew was in the country, and they were like, I mean, risking or leaving their families in a distance area, but came here to take care of the visitors and their calls and wherever assistance. And we got a lot of inquiries. And next is when the dates come for departure, so their visas extension did for 1 month, and also the 2 more occasions it was extended for the benefit of the visitors, that is for free of charge. And the very importantly, to the tourists who had kind of a difficulties with accommodation, transportation, and also the finding alternative flight when there are certain routes or certain countries locked down. And for those assistance, the information center immensely helped. And also the even after like, I mean, the initial period of about 1 month operating this information center, and Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, where I'm working, open the office as an assisting counter. Of course, the assisting counter was established in our office in Colombo. And so likewise, we continued the support, giving information, and also the assistance as per their the request, food, shelter requirement, and also the contact with the embassies or the high commissioners, depending on the visitor requirement. And also when there are special cases like health assistance, also we had some arrangement with the health sector to assist the guests even and then required. And after the difficult period, and also like when the visitors who were planning to go and whose the travel could reschedule, we were having about 6,000 to 7,000 guests right around the country, which was a big task for us. And meantime, there were 3 hotels kept ready for any visitors to get the accommodation for quarantine. And likewise, different arrangements were made with the assistance of the health sector, so that it was announced and all these things were shared with the social media as well as the mass media in the country. And also, like when there are cases reported in the aspect of harassment or maybe a difficulty the guest with the tourist police, we were taking very strong actions. I still remember one time I had to travel to the eastern part of the country when there was a case reported, and within 2 days we were able to find a solution and also the assist the guests. Likewise, even traveling take almost 1 day to the east. And when come to the 3rd month of the lockdown, and we continued with the assistance, and also the wherever you need the shelter or food and medical assistance, they started communicating to the regional association, and also like giving them all these requirements on humanitarian ground. Actually, those we consider as the rights of our valued visitors. And also like even after the opening the country for the domestic people, and also the halfway office open, still about 2,000 visitors in different areas living in the country. And also like very important action we have taken as a responsible country as well as responsible tourism sector. In the month of May, we visited as a team, association members and the government organization, to see the visitors and speak to them and gave them a token of appreciation in different areas where the tourism centers. What you see on the screen, the team who visited with a face mask, and also the including the tourist police, and also when we met them, how they were happy, and also like they were taking group pictures, this and that. So in this way, we extended our hospitality to the tourists and show we are with you, and also if there is anything, not only by the distance communication, but also will come to you. So this is how we took care our own valued guests at a difficult time when they were kind of a lockdown over 2 months. And then moving into the future of the our arrangement, or maybe future plan for both for international and domestic tourists. So we have advised, or rather we have in Sri Lanka, the public health guideline published on the public website, and also the any information issued by the government, how many affected, how many been treated, and maybe the areas where the affected people found. All those information then and there they issued, and also the not only the lockdown information, but any other information at the releasing also so was given. With this health guideline, the public health officers supervision was extended, where the public health officers right around the country is available, not only for tourism but also for public requirement. But when come to the tourism, so they especially came and help us to set up the hotels or accommodation centers as well as the tourist centers, which comply with the basic health requirement as per a guest. And thereafter, from the Sri Lanka Tourism Ministry as well as the Tourism Development Authority, the tourism operation guidelines were issued, which anyone can see on the screen as I have shown on my screen, the cover page of the document. There are about 89 pages, a lengthy document, but still it has given a very clearly accommodation sector, food and beverage sector, as well as the travel agency, and also like any other services, how to welcome and how to protect our valued guests and our employees, as well as the protect our people while doing the tourism is very clearly given. And also the at the beginning, the government took a decision, and also it was taken forward by the Tourism Ministry and the Tourism Development Authority, only registered tourist hotels and other services permitted to open. This is very important because all registered establishments, we can guarantee that the basic standards being fulfilled, and also their health requirement being looked after by the public health officer, where we want to ensure that not only the information but also the facilities, as well as they are taking care with respect to not only the facility but also their health requirement being taken care by the registered place, where we know where they are and also what are the facilities and whom the service given to the visitor. And also the in future, when the country was open, it was scheduled to open on August 1st, but still now it is postponed. But we were keeping our product people ready to welcome the guests, and the PCR test schedule at the time of arrival. Of course, Sri Lanka is a country the visitor need on arrival visa as well as the online visa arrangement was there. But in future, it will be only visa on arrival will not be there, but the visitors will have to get a prior visa. But prior to that, they have to get the PCR test certificate, and then only they will get the visa. But still on arrival, they will face one PCR test, and also in 5 days and 10 days, they were to face the or rather kind of get the PCR test. So which is for the interest of the visitor, as well as to protect any risk because of the tourism. And also we have a schedule, the visitor movement to be recorded. Like it is not allowed the what you call this public transport to use at the moment by visitor, and also like visitor movement to be recorded, like I'm from airport to what hotel, and from first hotel to the second hotel, with whom and when. Likewise, the information to record it, because if there in case we are to find out all the movement record, so which is for the interest of the visitor. And also the in our guideline, it's very importantly given rapid response team to be like established in all tourist service establishments, so that not only the services, but also if there is a certain case reported, what to be done with the guest for the protection of the same guest as well as the other guests, and where the area COVID-19 health action team is connected, and their numbers being shared with this rapid responses team. If I make it a little clear, the rapid responses team in the tourism service establishment, the area COVID-19 health action team is for the all the actions with regard to COVID, the incidents, public or the tourists or whatever. The moment when there is a case is reported, the rapid response team will communicate with the health action team in the area, so that they will they take in the affected person into a hospital or maybe a quarantine place or whatever. All these arrangements, they will take the decision and quickly take the action. And also the beyond all these guideline and arrangement, regional awareness programs have been started, where public health officer and the tourist police is part and parcel of our team. So with which we have completed almost about 4-5 provinces with all the stakeholders and associations in the different part of the country. And also that we continue to open the 1912 hotline assistance, and also the tourist police 24/7 as a assistance for future. So likewise, we have been making some arrangement to take care of our valued guest. And as I mentioned, the basic the rights, so information, and also they are logistic, as well as the various arrangements such as flight or whatever, the logistic arrangement. Then again, the food, shelter, we take care. And also beyond that health assistance also we be ready. We don't consider a tourist as a visitor camp or temporarily, but we consider tourists same as a citizen. We take care of them while they are in the country. So this is how Sri Lanka has been taking this in the situation to care our guests. So with that, the same benefit to tourism in the future, winning the confidence of the guest, and also like we want to keep the trust on our valued guests in the future. So this is how the Sri Lanka readiness for this one. We have a time, the guest who got the special assistance as well as the support from the Sri Lankans and the government setup. So we have a very short video clip. It explains more than my wording how they feel after getting all this assistance in the country. Thank you. Can we see the video?
When you shut down an entire airline, there are consequences. People get stranded and they can no longer fly home. Right now, millions of tourists are stuck in countries that are not their home countries. They find themselves alone with little money, little support, away from their family, because it's literally impossible and illegal to fly back home.
Everything that I'm reading on Twitter and Facebook is saying that the people that are following through with that are unable to get anywhere.
So what are these millions of people supposed to do? Well, this is a problem, and there is one country that is trying to fix it. It's called Sri Lanka. In a small town in Sri Lanka called Ella, 14 tourists got stuck with no money or home. They couldn't fly back, and they couldn't afford a hotel. And that's where Sri Lanka hospitality really shine. The entire city got together to help their 14 stranded tourists, to give them food, accommodation, and most importantly, give them family away from family.
This is a thank you to Sri Lanka
And the kindness and generosity of a town called Ella.
And this isn't just 14 tourists. On the entire country level, a new program was launched called Tourism Disaster Monitoring and Hosting Program. This is meant to support every stranded tourist in the country. If you are a foreigner stuck in Sri Lanka, they will host you, give you a home, give you food and support to survive the lockdown without going bankrupt. They will be your family away from family. More people need to be aware of these programs because...
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Upali. I have to say I'm deeply impressed by the case of Sri Lanka and how much attention you've put on a matter that is very dear to UNWTO and to our organization, and in which we've worked for such a long time. So I think it's also very interesting. You mentioned that you taken care of this issue as a humanitarian issue. And in fact, we've seen, some of the situations that have been created by the COVID-19 to tourists have almost caused a humanitarian situation. So the government, I see that the government of Sri Lanka has been extremely proactive in its approach. I'm very interested in everything you said and all the measures that you've taken. And I will definitely be in touch with you, because I want to find out more about the program you mentioned that you created specifically for this. I think this is very, very interesting. And also the information that you're giving, you just put a video, because it's not only having all these measures in place, but it's also informing tourists that all these measures are in place and all this contingency plan is in place, so that the country is ready in case there is another situation. Thank you very much. I will now move to the discussion of the panel, and taking your presentation, where you highlighted so many measures that the Sri Lankan government took during the crisis. I would like to ask Dr. Yan Lo. We've seen an exposition of many measures that can be taken. What measures do you think, in your views, what minimum measures could be put in place by states in the short and medium term We've heard some from Mr. Upali. Do you think there are others that could also be put in place in order to generate confidence for international tourists within or coming to the region? We've heard about information centers. We've heard about basic assistance on food and shelter. Is there anything specific that you find to be extremely relevant that also could be perhaps established in Macau in the short, long term that should be reproduced in the rest of the region? And do you foresee any impediments in harmonizing some of these minimum standards?
Well, I think in such emergency, usually if tourists fly to a place and they need a quarantine, then probably they'll worry about food and worry about places for quarantine and also the cost as well. So I think that's why I think the private sectors and they should know their social responsibility, and also the government should mediate and help those tourists. And in the case of Macau, and in the early February, there were a number of tourists stayed in Macau. And of course, we try to encourage them to leave. But also there are some tourist arrivals arrive in Macau. They need to be quarantined. So that's why they were sent to a designated place, which is a hotel. Actually, it is a hotel. So basically, all the basic equipment are provided for those tourists who need quarantine, and also the local government subsidized. So that's why the cost is affordable. And for those Macau residents who want to come back home but somehow stuck in other places because of the cancellation of flights, so the Macau government also arranged some flights to bring them back home. So, this is what the Macau government is doing, and that's why we don't have a very serious problem in Macau regarding this, because basically no tourists were stuck in Macau. And so far, we don't have any quarantine policy for visitors, because those visitors are only coming from those neighbor cities where 0 new case of infection. So yeah, this is what I can tell.
Thank you, Dr. Yanlo. Mr. Junichi Kumara, what do you think, what are your views regarding minimum measures that could be put in place? I mean, we've heard Mr. Upali, and there was a list of measures that they've taken. Which one of those do you think are relevant, that could perhaps be harmonized across the region? Which ones do you think are more important, and perhaps do you think that others should also be implemented in the short, medium term in order to generate confidence to international tourists?
I was so impressed by the video clip which the Mr. Upali presented, and very humanitarian approach, which we also experienced the same phenomena during the great Eastern earthquake in Japan in 2011 at the time. So the many foreign tourists just try to evacuate those devastated area, but normally the local communities support their travelers, and they let them go out as soon as possible. There was a great approach, especially in the Asian way, I think. So but basically, what I think in the based on the business point of view is we need a more comprehensive protocol for new normal on the ground, such as for the tour operators, hotel, train, sightseeing spots, which may assure the customers and tourists regain the confidence. Since the JTB is one of the members of the World Tourism and Travel Council, which is WTTC, created the WTTC travel stamp, which is exactly the right models as a tool for the facilitate the communication between the service providers and also the travelers on the ground. And also the quarantine regulation must be gradually, scientifically, must be eased for the travelers who has received the firm negative result of the PCR testing. That is, and additionally, the medical assistance at the destination would also assure the confidence of the travelers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jack. I would like now to ask Mr. Rupali. You most of the measures that you presented have been taken by the government. So I wonder, perhaps the crisis has also highlighted, I mean, for example, here in Europe, the obligation to assist tourists mainly relies on the tourism service provider and not that much on the government. But of course, this is not thought for crises such as the COVID-19, where tourists are stranded not for, you know, a couple of days or a week, but sometimes for months. So do you think that this crisis in particular has revealed some loopholes in the legislation when it comes to the assistance to tourists in emergency situations? You created a new program, for instance, to cover this. And do you think in the future that there has to be perhaps a different, how do you think that we can have a more fair share of responsibilities between the government and the tourism stakeholders and even the insurance providers? Do you have any views on this?
Thank you for the questions. Actually, though the government is taking the lead role on assistance, it is always communicating and also the working as a team with the private sector. As I mentioned, when we visit the regional, the tourists, it was a government who took care of the some part of the cost and also the all these assistance from the private sector. It was a joint effort. And also the information counter, the government set up the center, and also the private sector came and worked with. And also in decision making in all the aspects, at least 1 or 2 times per week, the all major associations like the Hotels Association, City Hotels Association, then the Tour Operators Association, Travel Agents Association, all sit together. But in decision implementation, the government take the lead role. Sometimes the cost part of it, government takes it, because the industry is facing a severe difficulty with regard to their businesses and paying salaries and all those things. Though I talk about the what you call this only about the guests, but also the employees who are working, and also like I mean the dependents and self-employed and all those assistants also working on the other side, for which also the as a team we are working. So therefore the legislation there can be some more improvement, but for the moment for the interest of the visitor, we will not keep any room. And also like I mean it is a collective communication, and more often the requirements are shown by the private sector, who kind of communicate, deal, and also the taking care of the guests. They know the feelings of the guests, but government is listening and also the collectively taking decision and then bring it to the implementation. So this is how we work.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rupali. Dr. Yanlo, how do you see this cooperation among the between the government and the tourism service providers and the share of responsibilities among them? Do you think that perhaps we need to find a different share of responsibilities, or in view of the COVID-19 scenario and the challenges, the exceptional challenges that this is posing?
I think definitely the tourism sector, the private business sector, they know they should share the social responsibility. So particularly in the pandemic, right? And the communication between the government and the private sectors is very necessary, because the government needs to explain to the private sector and how to share the social responsibility, how to take care of the tourists, right? Also, perhaps Macau is a little lucky, because there was very few complaints or very few problems between the travel agency and the tourists, because when the tourists try to cancel or try to get the refund, and basically they just follow the refund policy set by the private sector, and before they make the payments, and they already knew how to refund, in what situation they can be refunded or partially refunded. And if customers have some problems regarding the refund policy, and they can also consult with the tourism office in Macau, and the tourism office of Macau will involve and try to, you know, mediate, again, this word, mediate, and to help them to settle down the problems. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Junichi Kumada, you mentioned that this is a timely moment to review the rules and we all know that new rules will be established, also imposing obligations on tourists. You mentioned, for example, the quarantines. They might be forced quarantines if there is a suspected case. So who will pay for that? Who will, situations that we didn't encounter before and that will now need to be covered by new laws. So my question to you is, do you think that these new rules should be potentially harmonized as much as possible, of course, at the regional or global level?
Yes, I totally agree with that, actually, yes. And also there must be more, very innovative way, and with the digital solutions. Of course, it's costs, but the innovation is not only by digital, but also the some innovative mind and way of thinking. So, and also the coordinated approach between the two countries or multiple countries. For example, like, amid the, let's squeeze one PCR test for the, within the 10 days travels. So that kind of ideas for the bilateral travels. So maybe this kind of approach should be more, on the, has to be on discussions.
Thank you. Mr. Upali, do you share the views of Mr. Junichi Kumada? Do you think that the new rules that we put in place, the new consumer rights that we put in place in the post-COVID-19 scenario to cover for all these new situations that we will encounter, do you think they could be, or they should be, harmonized as much as possible in the regional, global level? Or do you think that, there has to be a national approach? What do you think? You're muted. You need to unmute the microphone. Thank you.
It's vitally important. When we face the Easter Sunday incidents, we knew how visitor need the help until the last visitor who affected leave the country. We have been taking care. So therefore, this time also we had immediate the reaction, and also the kind of teams to attend all these things. But again, when we look at the other part of the world, there are countries who face this kind of a situation for the first time, and also there are difficulties faced by the visitors, and also a visitor who is in our country might have to travel via some other country. Sometimes they are travel to some other country, then go to the destination, in which we have a total responsibility to take care until the visitor goes back to the home. So therefore, having the minimum standard and having the minimum the consumer rights some sort of protected, as well as the standard, is vitally important, where not only one country, wherever the visitor goes, visitor being respected, visitor being taken care at a difficulty beyond the visitor's control, the health requirement as well as the basic requirement, and also the the laws, or maybe whatever the differences will not happen, will not affect him to travel back to home, is something we got to be sure of. To do all these things, the basic standard maintenance and also the some sort of a uniformity is necessary, so that even in the future, with a risk of having some kind of a crisis situation, the visitor will have the confidence to travel. Visitor will have a trust on traveling in destinations. It will happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Upali. So I think we share, the panelists share also the views of the Secretariat on this, which is excellent to know that you, who are the real experts on this, also share our views on the matter. And I would like now also to take the opportunity to invite two representatives of our member states that are here today with us to also share with us some comments on what has been discussed during the webinar today. What are your ideas? What are your views on this? So I would like to ask first Mr. Mazharul Islam, Assistant Director in Bangladesh Tourism Board, to give us his views and comments on everything we've been saying throughout the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Good morning and good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Alicia and all the panelists for their nice presentation, especially Alicia, well explained about the rebuilding trust and obligations of tourists and service providers. She well explained about 2010 Icelandic volcano crisis. And I have a question. I have some question to Dr. Yan Lo. Dr. Yan Lo, she mentioned in her presentation that 14 days quarantine is mandatory, and nucleic acid certificate is also mandatory, and finally 14 days travel history. This part is common for all the countries nowadays. And now I want to know about the voucher process. She mentioned in her presentation that voucher can assure consumers' right. How can you process this kind of vouchers?
Well, I remember. Thank you very much for your question. As now, the government is trying to attract the local tourists to join the tour in order to bring some business to the tourism sector. So that's why the tourism office actually delivers some vouchers for those people who register and to join the package tour. For example, now they get 100 pedagogues. 100 pedagogues for joining the package tour, and the registration fee is very low. It's about 18 pedagogues for joining the tour, but instead they at the same time they get 100 voucher for lunch during the package tour. So that's why many local peoples are happy to join, because many local peoples, they have been locked in Macau for a long time. They want to go out for holiday, but somehow they cannot go out. So they have to stay in Macau and to find a holiday for themselves. So for them, this is a very good chance to explore somewhere of Macau that they never notice or they ignore in their routine days. Yes.
I have another question to you. Your country is encouraging short tour, and what do you think about redesigning the rules and regulations for the upcoming days?
You mean for the coming days, the regulation to open to welcome more international tourists, right? So, well, of course, we expect more international tourists to come, but the prerequisite is we have to make sure those tourists come from a place where it's very low infection. So now why Macau is closed for international tourists? Because you know, in a kind of a bad words that is not very safe in other countries, because the increasing number of new infection, the new cases. So that's why I think we need a communication with those countries or places where has low rates of infection. So once the communication is established, then it is very likely to open the border to different destinations or to different places to welcome those tourists to come, right? But the prerequisite is they need to, we need a communication, and we need to implement some measures to make sure those tourist arrivals are free of coronavirus. Yes.
Thank you, Yan Lo. Thank you, Alicia, for giving me the time.
Thank you very much for your very good questions and constructive approach to the lively, to having a lively discussion also with all the panelists. And now I would like to also invite another representative of one of our member states that we have here today, Ms. Hathin Talal, Principal Tourism Officer at the Ministry of Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport of Fiji. So if you want to share any comments or questions you may have with the panel, please.
Thank you, Alicia. Good evening, colleagues from Fiji. It's nighttime here almost. It's great to have everyone's opening up their tourism sectors slowly, as with us here in Fiji in the Pacific. It's even greater to see some of our travel protocols aligned, like the 14-day quarantine and the requirement for a negative PCR test. So that gives another layer of confidence, sort of in terms of harmonizing our travel protocols. I heard a lot about consumer rights, which is great. Harmonizing consumer rights internationally will depend on, I guess, what we can all agree as a minimum standard, so to speak, just like travel protocols. But some things will vary. I think we can all agree on that. Like with the repatriation of citizens, again, that's a call on humanitarian grounds. But there are some countries that are reliant on other foreign carriers. For example, in Fiji, we have a lot of Pacific Island countries that rely on our national carrier. So that's an important consideration I felt just to share. I just have one question, well, not to any specific panelists, but in general. So again, the Global Web Index says feeling safe will be the first and the #1 determining factor when choosing your holiday destination. In your own experience to the panelists and your views, of course, what do you feel is, what do you feel people perceive as safe, COVID safe? Is it just health measures alone, and or what else do you feel would be equally important when you classify yourself as COVID safe, as a destination, that is?
Thank you very much, Ms. Jacinta. I don't know if our panelists want to take up this question. Of course, from UNWTO's perspective, we think that, and as I introduced, that this goes beyond having health and safety protocols regarding the virus, but also having, in place mechanisms and contingency plans in case there is an emergency to assist tourists. But I think probably Mr. Upali is also of this view. But I don't know if any of the panelists would like to reply to these questions and say what they consider to be the package for, branding the destination as a safe destination. Dr.
Well, I'd like to give my points of view. I think to make tourists feel safe about a destination, it is important to show how well the destination is having the coronavirus under control. And showing the number of infection is important, particularly when a place has no, like in Macau, we don't have the new case of infection, and I think it's good to show the numbers to potential tourists. And the second way is, I think some very minimum measure is very necessary. Like in Macau, we ask those tourists to do the test before their departure. And I think this can guarantee that the tourists, when they arrive in the place, they are free of any coronavirus. So this also can comfort the local people, to make local people feel more comfortable with tourists, because they don't know those tourists, right? So if the tourists have already done the test to prove that they are free of coronavirus, and I think for both two parties, the tourists and the local people, will feel happy about that. So this is also one way what Macau is doing to make people believe that, well, this is safe. This is a safe destination. So thank you.
Yeah. Can I add my comment also?
Of course, please.
Yeah, what we feel is allowing only the health practices will not help. The visitor will have to have a confidence that in the country in general, the COVID, the pandemic being managed properly, and that information being communicated, like Dr. mentioned. And beyond than that, the visitor facility and also the visit satisfaction. For that one, they go to get the services of the citizens, and also the services need to meet the required quality, because they pay a high price, and also visit to a country because they want to enjoy the tourism product. But that one also, like beyond the health requirement and social distancing, so whatever, we want to ensure that the staff being aware, staff being trained, staff being given the due knowledge or maybe the training to fulfill this requirement. Then general public, the public sometimes think that the pandemic fear will come with the tourists, whereas tourists might think that I may get the risk from the local people. So to prevent that situation, how measures been taken, and how every point, whether they are go for the restaurant, or whether they are on the move, or whether they are in the transportation. So likewise, on all the aspects need to take care, and where the visitor will have the confidence, and the guest, the local people will have the confidence, and employees will have the confidence as well. And for example, the linen department of a hotel, like, I mean, not in the normal way, but in future it has to be a different way. So likewise, the total requirement of the guest and also the one guest to the other one, the movement and all those things need to take into consideration. Then only the visitor will get the confidence, and those need to be communicated to the guest and also need to practice in the destination, so that the repeat visitors and they are sharing the information, the confidence to others, and so it will continue. So in which we will be able to live with the corona situation and also the go ahead with the tourism in the future. So we got to work out a different platform for which the today's subject, the minimum standard, as well as the awareness and also like everyone's readiness is very important.
Thank you very much, Mr. Upali.
Alicia, just one thing, as a private sector, we also do this survey among the Japanese, the demands and feeling what kind of, barriers do they have for their travel. And recently, of course, the uncertainty of the COVID-19 is a huge volume, but the lack of information of the destination is one of the kind of increasing, because they would like to collect the information, but they just cannot approach the right information. So that is another things to make the customers assured to travel again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jacinta, I don't know if you want to give us some more comments or questions.
Yes, I just had one more comment and question just while on the topic of consumer rights. I know it's extremely important from this end as well. Fiji has been repatriating foreign nationals for months now, and luckily we're a smaller island state, so we didn't have thousands of visitors to repatriate. Again, of course, but from a business perspective, I know this might not be the correct forum because we are advocating for consumer rights here. But when we look at business rights, and I think someone has also asked this question in the Q&A tab, are there maybe to Mr. Upali or to Mr. Kumara-san, maybe they could share their experience and how how businesses are protected, their rights. For instance, an amendment to the employment laws classifying COVID as an act of God, so to speak, so that that provides some relief to businesses as well. And I also from Mr. Upali's presentation on the accommodation providers. So only if you're registered, you're allowed to operate. You're permitted to operate and serve tourists. On that note, I just wanted to see if that meant removing all the informal businesses like Airbnbs and your little bed and breakfast, because that has an economic imperative to that as well. And I guess basically how you find the balance, really just so how businesses are also protected.
Thank you very much for this excellent question. And there are actually also a couple of questions in YouTube on this. So there was a lady who was asking, how do we strike a good balance between consumer rights and the economy? Livelihoods of people are also at stake, while consumers are entitled to their rights as well. And also, gentleman asked, in the event of a resurgence of COVID-19 in the future, will the act of God be valid? This will place an enormous burden on the tour operators and insurance companies. So we're not advocating only for consumer rights. Of course, we're advocating for consumer rights, but we think that we need a balance. So, and this is the most, this is the trickiest part. This is where it's really going to be difficult, because we had some set of rules that were working in the old, let's say the before COVID-19 crisis. And COVID-19 crisis, as I said in my presentation, has sort of changed the rules of the game. We've seen how tourists have taken a big burden of it. But in some countries also, because the regulations are very stringent, for example, in Europe, they're very stringent to tour operators and other tourism providers. These tour operators and tourism service providers have gone bankrupt because they could just not face the responsibilities that were requested from them. So this is where we need to find a new distribution of responsibilities that works for the future. And of course, this is extremely complex, and no one has a solution right now because things are still evolving, and we're still, thinking how to do this. And this is where we, of course, when we develop this international code, we plan to, have an extensive debate with the member states, but also with experts. And so try to find solutions that are effective and are more equitable to all, including involving the insurance companies, because we believe they should also have a role in the future. This is the perspective from UNWTO. I don't know if any of the panelists would like to comment on this.
I would like to share my points of view again. I know that it is quite difficult to balance the economy and the safety. If we need to improve the economy and we need more tourists to come, but if we need more tourists to come, then how do we ensure the safety of the destination? So the only thing we can do is to make sure those tourists who come to our place are free of coronavirus. So that's why we need to ask them for, ask them to do a test and to prove that they're free of coronavirus. So only then they don't need to be quarantined. And as one of the participants comment that fewer quarantine and more convenience for, but if we do not have a very solid measures to protect us and also protect the tourists from coronavirus, and quarantine becomes very necessary. So my comments is to improve the economy. Firstly, we need to protect the safety. To protect the safety, we have to ask tourists and local people to wear masks and also do the test before their departure to the place, to the destination. Thank you.
Can I?
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, please.
Can I?
Mr. Upali? Yes.
Yes.
Please.
Yes. Actually, question is very important. Not only the visitor, but also the business community rights also need to be kind of taken care. Because when a visitor comes to the country, it is the business community who serve, especially in countries where the private sector is the service provider. In Sri Lanka, 99% services are provided by the private sector, and they are also facing a very difficult situation. So they are the capital loan payment and also their interest payment and their salary and maintenance, all those things are subject to challenges. And some can bear the cost, but some cannot. So in which the government has taken many measures to kind of introduce a moratorium for the loans and also the interest payment. And also some occasions, like in our organization, the service organization registration fees and also the renewal fees, all these things were exempted. And also the land leases have been exempted, tax payment been exempted. Likewise, the many reliefs were offered. And also beyond that they were given a working capital loan at a 4% interest rate with a grace period. So likewise, many measures have taken to protect the industry aspect, because if they don't keep going, if they go bankrupt, next day we will have to find service people. And also to the employees, especially the self-employed, such as guide and the drivers. So there are toll payment going to made by the government. So likewise, there are many measures have taken to protect the service providers and the business community, especially the SME sector. But when it comes to the second part of the question, the informal sector, she made a question. In Sri Lanka, by law, all the tourist service organization need to be registered before they come into the what you call this tourism services. And the registration, the requirement is the basic fulfillment of the standards. So now why we made it compulsory for the registration? For us to guarantee our valued guests the basic standard being met by the service organization, we can confidently tell the guest when it is registered only. And also the non-registered people, when there are difficulties such as the land ownership or maybe the certain other approval before getting the registration. So we have kind of a release most of these requirements, and there is an arrangement within a 1 day by online. They can get registered, and temporary registration, or rather we call it provisional registration, is offered, so that within a 1 or 2 days they can become a formal sector, with which whether they offer to the Airbnb or Agoda, Booking.com or whatever, all those service, the persons also can get into the mainstream and can enjoy all the facilities given. And we are not going to the compromise the informal sector, as well as compromise in the sense compromise the standard because of the business community. And they also need to get the message that they will have to comply with the minimum requirement, so that for the interest of the guests. So likewise, we are taking kind of a total picture, taking care of the service provider, the business community, and also the self-employed people, and also ensure the standard being maintained, and also all these safety regulations, safety measures being taken. So likewise, the total picture, total package, we take it as a one. This is how we recommend that we need to have it, because the guest important, service person, the businessman important, employees are important, general public is important, because the tourism is not happening in a closed compartment. They are moving around. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rupali.
You're welcome.
One comment, Alicia, regarding the balancing between the life and economy is actually the life is top priorities. People includes the travelers and workers in the tourism sectors. In this sense, the most important indicators should be the level of the readiness to receive the patient of the COVID-19 in each destinations in the hospital. So that is a kind of one of the indicators we have to consider. So based on that, but also the economy recovery is very important. So what the Japan did, Japan will try for the next week is going to be, they put the $1.5 billion US worth revitalization campaign for the tourism sector to secure the life of workers, especially in the tourism. But on the other hand, the public opinion is very cautious, and many said that it should not start all over the country. It should be started like a travel bubbles destination basis. For example, like a Tokyo central area is still increasing the number, so the people from Tokyo has to wait a little bit more, but the rural area can start faster. So that is the situation at this moment. But basically, the self-driven mechanism will be the kind of a keys to reinstate the tourism recovery faster, I think, based on the public-private partnerships platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Junichi Kumar. And I think we all agree that, of course, the safety is the first priority at this moment. And from UNWTO's perspective, we've always been saying, put people first. I mean, that's and travel tomorrow. And let's whenever international tourism resumes, let's promote responsible and safe travel for the benefit of all, so that we do not expose ourselves to having to go again to major lockdowns and travel restrictions, but that we can all manage this pandemic in the best way possible. So I don't know, Ms. Lal, if you have any further questions or comments. Thank you very much.
That was all the questions I had. I just had a final thought when you mentioned putting people first, and I know that UNWTO closely advocates for that. I guess as destinations, when we promote ourselves as COVID safe, we're essentially making a commitment to potential travelers. We're all working really hard, our healthcare workers, our leaders, businesses, and just the general public. We're all working really hard to give them confidence and earn their trust in return. But I suppose this commitment won't fully work if we don't get a certain degree of commitment from the potential travelers as well. I guess we can all advocate around the dire need for behavioral change, as earlier mentioned by the panels, amongst potential travelers at every touch point along the very complex tourism ecosystem. For us in Fiji, we're soon launching what we're calling the Care Fiji Commitment. It's like a safety seal which different countries adapting differently. It provides for minimum standards for both health, hygiene, social distancing across the industry. So essentially, it's our commitment to the health and safety of travelers to Fiji, as well as their commitment to us. So I guess going forward, we can also say by putting people first, that doesn't only mean their rights, but it is also putting the onus on them as well in terms of our collective combating towards COVID. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lal. And I think it's a very important point that you raised, which is also that tourists also have an obligation on this to respect, all these new protocols and measures that are being taken for their own safety and also for the safety of the citizens of the countries that they are visiting. So I want to thank very much all the panelists for the great presentations, but also all the discussions. I think it's been extremely productive and fruitful, and personally, I've learned a lot, and I also take a lot of ideas for our internal discussions at the Secretariat. I also want to thank Mr. Islam from Bangladesh and Ms. Lal from Fiji. Thank you very much for your questions and comments. It was really interesting. And of course, I want to thank my dear colleague Harry for organizing this, Li Yang for being there always, with every detail. And when technology doesn't work, he was there to help. So, and the UNWTO Academy. And I will now give the floor to Harry for some final remarks and conclusion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alicia, for my conclusion part. Perhaps that, as I announced in the beginning, before I share a few words of closing, I'm pleased to share some of the outcome of the survey, in which 48% out of 67 participants from 15 member states. So my colleague showed the outcome. So specifically the question, is it necessary to strengthen the assistance to tourists in emergency situation in Asia and the Pacific? 44% responded, and great to see 100% of participants who joined the survey answered yes. And second question, do you think that it would be valuable to harmonize some minimum standard across the region concerning the tourism consumer right protection in the COVID-19 era? And all of 44 participants said immediate yes. And the third question, in case you have experienced a cancellation procedure for tourism and travel-related services since the start of pandemic, and how satisfied were you with the result obtained? And then 42% answered, and I'm glad that there was still ongoing 19%, but 5% answered very satisfied, and then 31% answered satisfied, and then only the 45% remained as a neutral. And then the last question, and today, how confident? I think this is an important question, that how confident are you to proceed to the booking of your upcoming vacation? And 48% answered, and only 4% answered very confident, and 23% answered confident, and unconfident is 38%, and then still 42% of respondents mentioned that it is not confident at all. So this is the outcome of the survey. And where I joined Alicia, that first of all, my immense thank you to Alicia for your excellent introduction and leading informative and very dynamic panel discussion. And also I want to thank for your unwavering and technical support for this webinar. And my sincere thanks also go to all the speakers, Mr. Pali and Dr. Law and Mr. Kumada, for sharing your inspirational messages and expert knowledge, idea, and invaluable contribution, and even very touching story that we just observed from Sri Lanka with those stranded tourists. And I would like to express my deep appreciation to all our members who actively participate in this important webinar today, including our friend from Fiji, Jacinta, for staying very late. And our dear colleague and friend and that World Tourism Organization always welcome and every effort taken to drive the restart of tourism in a responsible and sustainable way, placing the well-being of tourists first. I think that building resilience for a brighter future for all. And indeed, we are in the totally unprecedented situation, but this crisis may also offer a unique opportunity to save tourism sector to ensure it not only grow, but grow better with inclusivity, sustainability, and responsibility prioritized. And I would like to conclude the webinar by quoting the UNWTO Secretary General, who mentioned that we must support the sector now while we prepare for it to come back stronger and more sustainable way. And recovery plans and programs for tourism will translate into job and economic growth. And for the last housekeeping announcement, and I have the great pleasure to remind you all that the Institute for Tourism Studies, that we have the Dr. Law, the Macau, that in collaboration with UNWTO organized the 9th IFTM and UNWTO training program on handling, coping, and dealing with the COVID-19. And we invite one representative from each member state from Asia and Pacific to join. And this 9th training program will be organized virtually for obvious reasons, but nonetheless, it comprises highly specialized and interactive 4 webinars, which have been carefully designed to support the regional recovery effort from the current crisis. And each webinar is focused on a different topic, like sustainable tourism policy and planning in the post-COVID-19 era on the 21st of July next week, and destination management in the era of new normal, safety and security on the 23rd of July, and the strategic marketing for the post-COVID-19 era on the 28th of July, and the human resources management in the post-COVID-19 challenges and opportunity will be organized on the 30th of July. So in this regard, and please make sure to join this important and the training program that we offer. And in closing, I also wish to thank my own colleague, Li Yang, and UNWTO Academy, Lucy and her team, who made this webinar very smooth and successful. So with that, my dear friend and colleague, once again, I thank you so much for your active participation today. And let us reassure you to our distinguished member state that Regional Department for Asia and the Pacific at UNWTO shall be working closely with you all to harness the power of tourism in that national tourism recovery process and to prove the tourism sector's ability to adopt better recovery of the post-COVID-19. Thank you so much again for your active participation. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adios.
Thank
hasta
you.
luego.
Thank you.
Adios.
Thank you very much. Once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next week.
I see you.
Thank you, you all.